life, in terms of the expansion of life, isn't time fixed. It's more expansion fixed. So if you think about the function of time, what time is good for, it's opportunity. So when you can expand yourself, you expand the opportunity that fits within a shorter amount of time, thereby things can move more quickly. But to expand opportunity, you can't just grow in one direction. You have to grow in both directions. There has to be a kind of reciprocity or balance, right? Like if you want a bigger wheel and you've got an axle in the middle, the wheel has to grow from the axle, has to grow from the center. And so you have to grow from the center in the same way. One example of this is that you can't just brute willpower your way through tremendous growth. You also have to bring equal amounts of levity, equal amounts of rest. And the more fixated you are on a certain outcome, the more you have to be fluid with how that outcome takes place. And these are kind of like natural laws of creation in the universe that seem to hold true. I've been through periods of time where I've been very like, I'll go with the flow, it's all sweet, let's see what happens. And what I found is that that works best when I also have a clear, like a value or like an essence that I'm kind of focusing on. And then I can really relax around that. And that feeds me with the energy to then use that more intentional, potent aspect of my being to create that thing. And then when I recover, I'm really recovering. In internal arts, we can think about the yang and yin aspect of the being. And so we think about this central axis of the body when you're standing, for example, like your spine and your balance point. Now, the more you're in touch with that, the more you're in touch between crown and feet or heaven and earth, the more you can kind of let go of anything that's not essential to that balance. You can let go of anything that's not essential to that structure. You can be really fluid the more you know your center point. And if we're thinking about your skill sets in life, like for me, writing is a huge skill set, speaking is a huge skill set, movement is a huge skill set. Like if I know my actual skill sets and I prioritize those skill sets, then whatever I express, like whatever medium I'm using or wherever I find myself, I'm going to have something to amplify. Now, what can be tricky online if you're trying to make something or build something is you can have certain skill sets, but if you focus disproportionately on the amplification of the skill sets rather than on the building of them, then you're going to have a little bit of a pendulum issue. When you can focus on both and you know they're relatively balanced, once again you're growing from the center outward, then the net effect is that you can help more people and do better. But a lot of people are trying to just really grow in one direction, like the marketing, for example, if they're a coach, or just really growing in the practice direction, but there's no sharing and there's no connecting and upgrading the models. So as we go through life, we upgrade our models of understanding. We start to realize that yes, we always have a certain access to the truth, and that's always incomplete, and we find new aspects and new vantage points on the truth. And what I think is important is that we remain in touch with the more essential parts of ourselves as we do that. Now, obviously anyone can change, right? We can all change, we can all become something different, and our deepest essence, our true nature is somehow formless, and it's kind of in consciousness. But you also do have a bit of a blueprint, you know, you have your body, you have the genetics, you have the world you've been born in and the conditioning that you have, and you can't deny these things. You need to accept and integrate these things and find ways to allow life to flow naturally in the path of least resistance, like electricity through the circuit board that is you and your blueprint. So for me, for example, like if I take Buddhist teachings or spiritual teachings, I want to be enlightened. My version of that is not going to necessarily look like being a monk. It's not going to necessarily look like being a businessman. Like I have my own blueprint, my own culture. Life moves through me in a unique way, as life moves through you in a unique way. So everything that we learn online and everything that we're looking at is kind of like filling our container with more pixels of information, more pieces of potential. But what we then need to balance that with is an equal amount of centration and resetting and being away from all of that to see how that information naturally organizes itself within the container of our being at a time when we're not constantly feeding ourselves new stuff. Otherwise it gets overwhelming, it becomes static, it becomes like noise. We need to let things rest into and sift through and settle into our own embodied context. So when I talk about the path of least resistance, I'm not talking about, it's not lazy. It's not that. It's the path of least resistance means like using the existing openings in your life, using the existing opportunities you have, using whatever you've already created, no matter what form that takes. And rather than looking at it as like perfect or imperfect or ideal or far from ideal, you just use whatever you've created, and you continue to take that energy or that offering of your past work and you let it transform and you set it free. You don't have to cancel out anything you've done in life. You don't have to and you in fact can't undo anything that has happened, but the way you perceive it and the way you allow it to unfold in a way that you don't expect is what transforms the essence of that thing into something that's life-giving in the present and life-giving in the future, rather than something which further contains you into your psychological prisons. When we look at the way natural law works, natural law being kind of like the way that energy is exchanged, the way that organisms operate in symbiosis, like plants and mushrooms and sky and all of the elements and how it all plays and works. And we look at the sort of fractal nature of how things grow, and we look at how things seem to grow from a central point outward. When we look at these kinds of themes and we apply them to our own body, or we look at how they arise in our own body, they can give us clues. It's not always strict directions. It's not like you have to do it this way, but they can give us clues as to kind of a feeling essence, a feeling and an envisioning essence, which can help us to live in a way which is harmonious with ourselves. And when there's inner harmony, there becomes inner resonance, and there becomes this amplification of everything that you have to offer in the world, and then it becomes visible to others who can join you if they want to. This path may seem to require huge amounts of trust in something that's unknown. And in a way it does, but in a way, in the natural world, the reminders are everywhere. When you look at the conditions under which things grow and bloom, we see that there is collaboration. We see that there's a certain amount of exposure and a certain amount of nurturing. We see that there's a certain diversity. We see that there's a certain exploration of different opportunities. Like the being puts out the tendrils, the plant puts out the little new, sproutlets. Which way is the light going to nourish me the most? And we do this gradually, we do this seasonally, and we do this at our own pace based on the conditions that we are in. So you need to make sure that when you're in the augmented world, which is watching my face on a screen and digesting all of this online content, that just because it seems to be presented and in a box, that does not mean that that's how it will actually work for you in the most energizing way. And lastly, guys, if you have any doubts about your ability to emerge from the most testing times in your life, or if you have any doubts about the utility and the beauty in the really, really difficult stuff, I promise you that is the manure. I promise you that is the manure. Only days ago, I've been going through some of the most challenging times. And it's not just because of my mental state, it's because of difficult circumstances, partly within and largely outside of my control, and my need to find a way to recenter and cope with those. I'm using all of my skills, and it's wonderful to have these, all of the teachings and all of my embodied knowledge of how to apply them. But I can assure you that, like today, for example, my most beautiful, beautiful writing and speaking is coming out of me naturally like a waterfall. And it's not because there hasn't been tremendous resistance a few days ago. So it may not be the case that you can control the way life plays out, but you can understand certain principles. And one of the principles is that as things grow taller, they need deeper support systems and root systems. So when you're having really good times, when you're enjoying beautiful weather, when it feels really good outside, remember that that has come from the support systems, the community, the work you've done, the body of work, the practice. That's what has enabled the sky to look so open. It's because you're up high and you got your roots. And when you're feeling like you're just looking at dirt and you're just sifting and digging in the ground, remember that's so that you can grow higher. And both are necessary. And it's not really good or bad. It's just the way things need to develop. And when you understand that, it can give you a little bit of guidance no matter where you're at.